Test, test.
Hi, good evening. Welcome, everybody. Today is, what's day? I can't even remember what day. The 10th, oh my goodness. Today is November 10th, 2021. We are here on a special meeting of the Board of Trustees, Harlandale ISD. It is 6:15. We will begin our meeting. My name is Norma Cavazos and I am the board president. I am going to do our roll call to see which of my colleagues is here. Mr. Moreno.
Present, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mancha,
Present.
Mr. Luna,
Present.
Ms. Limon. Here. Thank you. Ms. Ortiz will be here in a minute. She is on her way. Ms. Carrillo sends her apologies. She will not be attending tonight's meeting. We do have a quorum. Mr. Soto, can you please let us know who's here from cabinet and staff?
Yes, Madam Chair, Board of Trustees. Tonight, we have our Executive Director of Operations, Dr. Hinojosa. Here. He is here.
Welcome,
Whoever-
Dr. Hinojosa. Congratulations on your new position.
We have our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mr. Richard Hernandez.
Here.
Our Curriculum Instruction Assistant Superintendent, Melissa Casey.
Here.
Our Executive Director of Human Resources, Dr. Salinas.
Present.
And our well-rested Public Information Officer, Mariana Veraza.
Here.
She had a great week last week. She was very busy.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. We also have Dr. Judy Castleberry. Good evening, Dr. Castleberry.
Good evening, thank you.
We do not have anyone that signed up for public comment, so we will be moving on to agenda item 3. As you all may know, we are trying to be more efficient and effective in our regular board meetings. And in order to do so, we are here at a work session. This is a board is going to conduct a work session with the superintendent and staff. Agenda item 3A. It's a discussion on board operation procedures, a 2-minute limit. I know that we had discussed and collaboratively decided that we would do a 2-minute per individual anytime there was a discussion between trustees and staff. And we were going to go once, 2 minutes max, go twice, 2 minute max. And then we would move on to the next item. Before I continue, Ms. Ortiz is here. It is 6:18. Welcome, Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you.
So I know in the last work session, there was some confusion as to what we all meant when we said 2-minute max discussion. And we discussed it just briefly and we said we would touch back. So right now, according to our board operating procedures, it says each member will have the opportunity to discuss an agenda item no more than twice for only 2 minutes each time. Before the item may be tabled, postponed, or action taken, and not a rebuttal to the previous speaker's commentary. I believe the confusion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Moreno, was whether this board operating procedure pertains to all our meetings, including work session and budget sessions. Is that correct, Mr. Moreno?
And if you may, Madam President, just to give more context on what you're kind of alluding to, is there's 2 indexes.
Mhm.
Item 2, and then you have under board meetings B discussion. So there's 2 different entries.
Okay,
So under my interpretation, and obviously it's at the will of the board, it's 2 different entities in terms of the entries of meeting. Board workshops I felt was a standalone
Mhm.
versus an actual regular called board meeting. I may be wrong, but that's the way I took it when we were discussing it in length the previous time over board operating procedures. If that's the case, then the caveat should be added to item 2 where it says board workshops, because it is a standalone item.
Okay.
Now, if we want to refer to legal, I know I mentioned to Mr. Resendez, like, hey, that's why whenever we don't have to vote for closing the meeting, or excuse me, for going into a recess of things like that, because technically we're not voting on any action.
Mhm.
So I don't know, Mr. Resendez would like to kind of elaborate on kind of how we touched on it the last time.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So in general, it is ultimately up to you all. And we do have it under discussion and yeah, there it is.
Mhm.
So I do think we need to make it clear if we're going to include budget workshops, and because when we talked about it, I don't remember us being real specific.
Mhm.
We just talked about board meetings. Technically is a workshop or a budget meeting, a board meeting, yeah, because you're posting the agenda. But I think for board operating procedures, to clarify, we should, if that's what y'all want to do.
Okay. So,
And then we would put it in either section or out one of the places, just to make sure that that applies to all those particular situations.
okay. So is there a particular manner or wording that my colleagues suggest so that we are all on the same page? And the reason why we put a limit is so that everybody can have a chance to speak, to discuss, to ask, but so that also no one is just gonna go 30, 40, 50 minutes on one particular item. I know we don't do that, but I'm just kind of, throwing it out there. So is there a particular wording that would make it, that would simplify it? Do we leave it as is and then put, except for? Does it, or I guess, let me start again. Does anyone feel, and I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, and I certainly don't want to put anybody in a position, but is everybody comfortable to keep the 2 minutes, whether it's a work session, a budget session, special call meeting, or regular board meeting? Or do the majority of us feel better if it is in particular, what is a 2-minute discussion limit on?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Limon.
Well, I'm not, since this is new to us, this work session, and when we had the last one and we were just limited on what we, and what we wanted to say, because we only had 2 minutes, since it's a work session, we're here to ask the questions, we're here to make clarification and direct us and what we're reading. I think we need more than 2 minutes. I know I do, but I think the 2 minutes is just limiting to what, we could clarify and whatever, the question is or whatever we're discussing. So if we could have a little bit more, it'd be great. So I just want more than 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Limon. Anybody else? Mr. Luna?
I was just thinking if we could just, I know in some boards I've been on, you can vote at the beginning of the meeting to suspend the rules, or you can vote to keep the rules at the beginning of the meeting. That way we know. We just can vote on them every time and say, we're gonna have the 2 minutes this time, and then maybe, because I know the budget meeting is gonna be a long meeting. And we're gonna go overboard in that meeting for sure. So something like that. Or have it worded like in all other meetings, you can have 4 minutes or 6 minutes, whatever we decide to have. Because we do need, like Ms. Limon saying, we do need to discuss some things. That's why we're having this workshop, so we can cut down the time in the regular school board meeting, so.
Mhm. True, I agree with you. Ms. Ortiz?
Yes, I agree with what Mr. Luna is saying, specific to suspending the rules. However, I don't want us to go every single meeting suspending the rules, because I keep the time. Hopefully, I'm always here on time to keep the time for Lone Star governance. And we have not been at all successful in getting our time towards student goals and student outcomes. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that Lone Star governance is what we're supposed to be following. And we're spending a whole lot of time, like I'm talking right now, a whole lot of time
Example.
about something other than what we are supposed to be doing in these meetings. And so I would like to make sure that we don't suspend this rule every single time. I would like to say that I think the 2-minute rule must be in place without exception for regular school board meetings. Now, budget meetings, I can understand, but we need to be vigilant about our time because we are spinning our wheels with Lone Star governance, not, we're spending 60-70% of our time outside of what we're supposed to be talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Moreno, do you have a suggestion?
I mean, my suggestion is just as is. I think it's kind of been proven last week in what we can do when we're working within a system. At the same time, the connotation of suspending rules, I don't like that connotation. In addition to that, I don't think this is an example of a regular board meeting. To me, in essence, this is a board workshop, and that's what we kind of referenced over and over again when we're going over the BOP. And frankly, you know, I don't see us going 30-40 minutes. Ultimately, it's cabinet going 30-40, almost an hour when it comes to stuff. And I told this to Mr. Soto as well, when we have regular board meetings, when you do break it down, I mean, obviously, like you have to consider like whenever staff is speaking, that's also contributing to that allotment of time. And so it's really a partnership on us to work collaboratively together to finesse the time in a way that benefits us. But to me, you know, ultimately the way it's worded, if we want to put an exception of board, you know, workshops, you know, to me, that to me would be fruitful for us because it would show that we are still actively listening. We're still actively working. We're still actively asking questions. Now, at the same time, we're still abiding by our ability to understand, hey, we're not going to go 30 minutes on a question. And I don't think at any point have we gone, I'm going to stick 30 minutes on one specific question on one specific you know, one specific item. So to me, if we want to put the exception of board meetings, I mean, to keep that separate, I mean, ultimately, that's what we put in this. On Wednesday prior to a regular scheduled meeting, the board will conduct a board workshop and then we have a typo there. I just realized that too. To conduct the workshop, it says due instead of to. Discuss items scheduled for the next meeting. No action is intended for to be taken on an item except discussed during this workshop. We can add that caveat into the actual board operating procedures where the exception of board workshops. Because as we referenced from some of our other colleagues throughout the area, they said that some of these meetings, it's not necessarily that they're trying to make them last long. It's just, you know, you're brainstorming, you're working together, you know, ideas are flowing, questions are coming up. And that could actually bring together good information. And at this point, Monday, I mean, the previous Monday, it was pretty quick other than of us having to still go into closed session and we spend 2-3 hours there. And that's really a lot of our time is with the data that is presented by the staff and information, and then us spending time in closed session, which doesn't really count towards the LSG. And I don't think LSG kind of counts towards the board workshop because the board workshop was as a result of LSG, wasn't it? So, I mean, I don't know how that kind of correlates, but to me, that's how it comes across.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno. So you said you wanted to say something?
I know Mr. Mancho's next, but I just want to clarify the LSG because he is mentioning a little bit of LSG and for us to be on the same page. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Casey, is these minutes in this workshop do go towards our LSG. The budget workshop doesn't. Miss Casey?
So if you look at this time tracker, and so basically what it does, if it's a statutory workshop, which is your budget, that's required, those minutes do not count against you. This meeting you elected to have, it's not required by statute, it's not required by law. So all of these minutes count in other minutes, they don't count in student minutes, which is what Ms. Ortiz was referring to. So even though we call it a workshop, it's not a workshop in LSG terms. So all of the minutes are considered other, not student outcomes.
But I would say too, I mean, our LSG coaches need to be more clear as well if they're the ones guiding us through these practices, because that wasn't informed to us whatsoever. So that's something we definitely need to, you know, note to them.
Do you want me to
they're-
make a copy of this? Or
No, I think we have
it kind
that
of
already.
details where the minutes go, and then we keep track. So for example, right now, we're taking time. So it's 6:30. This conversation has been going on for 12 minutes. So this is already in other minutes. So I'll literally put how many, like I have 2 minutes for what we did at the beginning. We'll add the minutes.
Yeah, well,
So
because
that's
even
just-
this is when we had the 2-day workshop in
Mhm,
May, they reference having a meeting like this and they're like, yeah, sometimes these meetings can go long.
mhm.
And yet they never once prefaced it with saying, hey, remember this
Mhm.
counts against you. And I
Mhm.
mean, I may have a bad memory, some people think that, but I think it's pretty clear. I don't remember that being shared.
Yeah, I think it's just in reference to the 2 minutes.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
mean,
just kind of for information while you're making the decision. This doesn't count. This is not similar to a budget workshop. This is a
Mhm.
very different type of workshop when in regards to LSG.
mhm. So then, and to be clear, it's going to be counting towards these minutes that we're going to have to attribute to.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Mancha.
that was basically the only thing that I was gonna say is instead of discussing it now, we ought to discuss it with the LSG group and then work it out there, because if we can go round and round and we're really not gonna get nowhere, because at the end, they're the ones that are supposed to guide us. And then we also need to redo it at a regular meeting so we can let the community know what we're doing since we presented it to them. And if we're gonna make any changes, it should be done at that time, not right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mancha. Well, then, if everybody feels comfortable, I certainly don't mind moving this to our next regular board meeting and inviting our LSG coaches to come and, give us some guidance as to what we can or cannot do, or what counts against us and what doesn't count against us. That way we're all on the same page.
And Madam Chair, if I
Yes,
may.
yes, sir. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I
Moreno.
mean, if that's the clarity and clarification that we have not had, if that's the way things should progress, then I'm okay with going with what we need to do in order to suffice and to maintain our kind of alignment to LSG. So that was never communicated to us, I don't think, in that vein.
Thank you. So then let's do that. If everybody is more comfortable that way we hear it from our coaches and we'll take it from there. Okay. So we'll put that on December's place. Agenda item 2. So I know that we all also agreed to have a reminder to ourselves as trustees of our board constraints. And for a few months, 2-3 months, I don't remember, I would read at a regular board meeting, one board constraint. The next month, it was another board constraint. And last month, I decided, let's take turns. We're all one voice, we're all individuals, but we're together, we're a team. And that way we all share in that responsibility and in that reminder. Thinking a little bit more about sharing in the responsibility and the reminder, I spoke to our LSG coaches and said, what can we do? What can we say so that we don't just recite words when it comes to our board constraints at our regular board meeting? What can we do to recite, to make ourselves accountable, to be clear and transparent with the community so that that can continue to lead us to success? And I don't mean the board success, I mean the district success, the children's success. We have done, in my opinion, a very good job of moving forward. This board is excellent at that. But I think for me, I wouldn't mind to be a little bit more accountable and a little bit more clear and transparent with my colleagues, with the community, with the district. So Ms. McAnally and she said, I think I have something that's perfect for the board. And so her suggestion was, we read the board constraint, whatever number of the constraint is at that particular meeting. And then the board president says, as we reflect on our leadership as board members, I'd invite each of us to replay our leadership tapes as we did in our Lone Star governance training. Board members, I invite each of us to go on record regarding your behavior, action over the last month or quarter, and the alignment of those behaviors and actions with board constraint number, whatever it happens to be that month. And we all read that board constraint and we say, I'll start with me. For me as board president, I, Norma Cavazos, am going on record as abiding by board constraint number, and in my behavior and actions, I have not performed or appeared to perform the duties of the superintendent, or whatever the language is of that particular board constraint. And I continue to focus on student outcomes and no adult outcomes. By reading this into the record, the board continues to affirm our LSG training, and we remind ourselves that I am genesis of transformation. I know we all look forward to moving forward, and we all are doing an excellent job. But I just felt like there needed to be a little bit more meaning behind each board constraint in our monthly regular board meetings. And so I wanted to throw that out there and hear from you all. Is it something you all want to consider to do? Is it something that you're like, no, I don't want to have to say anything. I don't even want to have to recite it. I don't keep anybody from saying how they feel. I make sure to give everybody the courtesy of expressing themselves. We may not always agree, and that's perfectly fine, but we certainly listen to each other, respect each other's views and opinions, and we move on from there. So that is my 2 cents worth as far as our regular board meetings when it comes to reminding ourselves of board constraints. Anybody have any opinions of what I just said?
So Madam Chair, just
Yes,
to
sir.
be clear, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
So every time, and I'm okay with it. I know I shared this with Mr. Soto. I mean, initially I thought that's what we normally do when we're trying to affirm something, we're reaffirming and stating something versus just I do or I am. When you're reading it, so every meeting you're gonna recite the verbiage that was in the parentheses as I reflect towards board constraint number. And then from there, everyone repeats that chorus.
Yes, sir.
Not at the same time, right?
No, it's not
Okay.
going to be like we're,
Like in unison.
no, yes,
like,
no.
okay.
It would be, okay,
It's not
so
like
we
a,
would start
like a
with the board
pledge of
president.
allegiance where we're all saying at the
Yes,
same
no, we
time.
would start with the board president and then the board vice
Yeah,
president.
to
and
me,
then
I'm
secretary.
okay with that. It's just maybe there could be a little bit more condensed verbiage,
Okay.
just so it can
And-
flow
and-
smoother.
Yes,
and
and
quicker.
Ms. McAnally and I, it was just something that we were like brainstorming and what could fit for your board and what would have meaning behind what the board is saying as individuals and as a team. So yes, we can most certainly revise it and be a little bit more concise. Mr. Mancha?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Simon.
So we were just talking about, the time, how much time we have staying on items, and I think you were doing a good job. I mean, you could, pass it on to somebody else. You have a little saying about a constraint at that time, and we will, somebody will repeat like I did the last one. I think that would be fine because it's short and quick. Let's get on to the next one. I think that would be the best idea you had in doing that. And just to keep it short and sweet. I think that'd be a good idea.
And Ms. Limon, we discussed that, Linda McAnally and I, and she said, because I said the whole point is us to be efficient and effective, not rush along on a regular board meeting, but keep moving it along, keep moving it along. And she said to me, when you all recite these words or words similar to this, when it comes to a board constraint, it is also because you are moving towards student outcome. You are being accountable and responsible of your behavior, of your actions, because this is a reminder of what you're doing at this table. It is not about Norma. It is not about Mr. Mancha. It is not about, Mr. Luna. It is about the students. And these words will have more impact to the community and to those students because they realize that this board is accountable. This board is responsible for the success of our students. And she says, talk to the board and, bring it up at the work session, see what everybody feels or how they want to move forward with it.
Madam Chair, additional
Yes,
question.
Mr. Moreno.
I guess, are you going to be asking for someone to take the initiative to say it first, or are
Oh,
you going to be like, okay, me first, then board vice president, secretary, like in
yes, sir.
that,
Exactly.
corresponding order?
Yes, I would be the first one because, board president and then vice president and then secretary. And then we would just go.
Yeah, because
down the
everybody would
line.
know, and that way we can just not have any lapse of time or just.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Ms. Ortiz, is there anything you want to add or
No,
Mr. Luna? And, Mr. Resendez always says your board operating procedures, is always a living document. This is certainly going to be added to our board operating procedures. And if it just means we're taking an hour and a half to say these words, we're going to revisit that one.
Madam Chair. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes, Ms. Casey.
When you do that, it does count towards your minutes.
It does, yes, yes, it does. And that's what we discussed, Ms. McAnally and I, that although it's going to cost you minutes, the power behind the meaning of the words each of you recite is going to suffice. Mhm. So we can certainly add it to our board operating procedures and then kind of, no, yes. Mhm, no, yes. And then we can revisit if we need to. Is that good? Okay, thank you, Mr. Resendez. Okay, so agenda item C. Mr. Soto, is it Dr. Hinojosa? No.
Yes, Ms. Casey?
So agenda item C is on page 4 of your board book. We currently have learning.com. It is our TEKS aligned curriculum and resources for tech apps for K through 8th grade. This is funded through our IMA funds, and the total amount is $69,997.50. It is a renewal. It's learning.com. Does anyone have questions?
Any questions or comments? Mr. Luna? No? Mr. Manta? I don't have any, but Ms. Ortiz?
yes,
Uh-huh.
I'd like to find out. So it says the instructional material for the following courses taught in Harlan ISD were adopted by the state of Texas for proclamation 2014. How old is the documents at learning.com? What version do we have?
I'd have to look at the version. So when it says proclamation, that's when we adopted. So because it's online, I imagine it is updated and I can look that up. But when proclamation, that's when we actually adopted and paid for it. And then it's good for probably 5 to 6 years, depending on the length of that proclamation.
So
But
we're
I-
talking that the material could possibly be 5 or 6 years old.
I'd have to look because this is an online resource.
Mhm.
So when we get textbooks that are paper, typically we could adopt a textbook, and if we purchase a book, we do keep the same book for 6, 7 years. It being online, I'd have to look because I imagine that is more fluid and it's updated more so. So most of our resources are online now.
Thank you.
Ms. Limon, did you want to say something? No? Okay. Okay, then moving on to agenda item D.
Yes, Madam Chair, campus improvement plans and the following will be a district improvement plans, which is will fall under Ms. Casey.
Yes, so I am going to talk about this, and we have Reina Gallegos as well, that we work together with this. This actually starts on page 5 of your board book. And basically every year, what our campuses do is they revisit their campus improvement plans. They do a needs assessment based on their data. They kind of consider input from all different sources. And then from there decide, what is it that we need? Where do we need to improve? How are we going to spend our budget? And so what we've done following that first page, you have, we call it an executive summary. We have one for every single campus. And what we did with the principal is we asked them to provide for us a very high level overview of what their goals are this year. So if you look at their CIP, for example, Adams, their CIP is about 40 pages long. We have those available that we can give those to you, but we weren't going to have a 1,000-page board book. So we asked them, what are the most important things for your campus that you want to focus on? And then you're going to find that every school has a different focus based on the needs of their campus. Some consistencies are STAR data. A lot of them are social and emotional wellness. Some of them are looking at family and community engagement. And so when you look at each one, they'll have what our current rating is. And what I noticed that some campuses did, all of our campus were not rated due to disaster because we were in COVID. Some of the schools opted to say, if we looked at the data that we had, this is what our rating would have been. So this is an example with Adams. They said currently they have a rating of D. They're not rated D. All of our campuses are not rated. But if they looked at their data, this is kind of what they worked through, and that's how the campus worked through it. And so what are their focus? You have the goals. These are just some of the goals. It's not, it's very typical for a campus to have anywhere between 12, 15 goals in the different areas. And then what is their focus? And if you go through, there's Adams, there's one for every single campus. I can give you a few minutes to look through them to see if you have any questions, but they're all very, very different. You're going to find that some of them said, we're going to work on small groups. Maybe when they worked with their teachers said, I really need to look at some small groups. Some commonalities, like I said, social emotional wellness, STAR scores, PLC, professional learning. And I would say that's going to be the bulk of it. We have some schools really focused on culture and motivating staff and students. I was very pleased to see some that focusing on attendance or focusing on discipline. Like when I looked at the DAEP one, it's really discipline and how they address discipline problems with students. So I'll give you a few minutes to look at those and see if you have any specific questions on campuses, and then we can go from there. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So did the district, I know that every campus is going to be different, but did the district give them 1 or 2 parameters that every single one of them has to address?
So one of the student achievement is always addressed. And then it's really prioritized based on your campus. That's why some schools say culture is what I'm focusing on. That is something that really we see as a need. Some of them are social emotional wellness. That is a need. Others were attendance, because across schools, there's something different. The student achievement is by far, just like it's your focus, that's our focus. That is a non-negotiable.
Okay, but when the instructions were sent out, that's what we told them, that, okay, you can have 15 different goals, but you have to include student achievement. Or is there anything else, STAR testing or whatever? But for sure, the district told them student achievement has to be part of your plan.
Yes, ma'am. And that's very consistent across T-tests, TPES goals, district improvement plans. That is something that everyone understands and knows, that you always have a student achievement goal. Any follow-up goals are of course based on what you need.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Moreno.
And this is more for Mr. Soto, because I do appreciate Mr. Soto in that he does give autonomy to his staff and he does give autonomy to his principals. And that's something that is really helpful, because sometimes when we have our hands in too many hats, or in too many pots, it kind of messes with things. So I really appreciate him doing that, because I know from our experience, it's a little cumbersome when we get 10 goals from the district and then we have to put 10 other goals from our own selves. It's a little difficult to put that together. And I appreciate you guys putting it in a way that's very easy with the executive summary versus the 40 pages CIP, even though I know they just have to like input stuff from previous years. But I appreciate that you guys give that autonomy. the same time, I mean, Mr. Soto has to be on them and Ms. Casey, because it falls back on them if things don't go the way they should. So, but, so thank you guys. Madam Chair, may I add one more thing?
Of course, Mr. Moreno.
So, and I do want to definitely acknowledge the emphasis on the social emotional learning. I think that's huge. I think as of now, we're already in October, November, and that's usually when we have the most disciplinary issues. And a lot of times it's the kids that have been unable to have structure and have things in order, especially coming back to school and trying to get assimilated to it. I've noticed a lot of issues with some of our kids being kind of regressing in their behaviors and also in their conduct. Kids that normally would be much more, especially in eighth grade, more mature, are still acting like they're in sixth grade. And then the same thing, we have, fifth graders acting like they're in third grade and crying and doing things that you're just like, wow, what is going on here? So hopefully, you guys can continue to provide those additional supports, and because I know that's also impacting the way our referrals are probably looking, and maybe even our DEP placements and things like that. So whatever we can do to support them, please continue to let us know. And I know Mr. Soto will share that out with us.
You bring up a good point. Something that I didn't share is that these campus improvement plans can be updated. So it might be, and you bring up like discipline, that is something that we see as a huge need. So we may go back to a district improvement plan and say, this is something we have to work on in light of some maybe new data. The other piece is it's updated quarterly. So we're all in one program called Plan for Learning, and every quarter, every administrator at each campus and us at the district level, we give updates based on the current data. So maybe it's not addressed yet. We're not there yet because it's star data, or maybe we see that we're on track to achieve it, or maybe we're not on track. But every quarter, we also do updates in every CIP on how we're headed towards our goal.
Ms. Casey, I don't have any questions. I may have them, and I will certainly email you and carbon copy Mr. Soto. I would like more than just a little bit time, and I know I reviewed them when we got them. But now I'm coming up with some questions that I thought, oh, it's better just to send it on an email, and I know Mr. Soto will share those answers with everybody.
Okay, and we also have the entire CIP plans. Ms. Juarez has them, and she can also share those.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much, thank you. See, you're a teacher, you know this stuff, I don't, I'd have to look into it. Yes, Mr. Luna, yes, sir.
I know, I dealt with this situation over 30 years with this CIP stuff. My only concern is that being on this side of the box now is that how the principals or administration, how they present it to their staff and how they make this a really living document. A bad example, me keep my head is like the Bible. People can hold the Bible, preach the Bible, know the Bible, but they're not really living the Bible. I mean, things like that. So how does it really, and it's not our job because it's his job to monitor how that's being really taken care of. So
So
I
I
know
think,
there's some fantastic administrators out there that they put, they make a theme and they integrate the CIP with the theme and whatever, it goes all year long. The kids know what the mission is. And then the other campus is like, who's that? I don't know who that is. That's the principal. I don't know if that's the principal. Who's this guy? I don't know who the superintendent. You know, they don't know. So, you know, that's what my concern about the CIP is that how really do the people know and apply the CIP to their daily lives or their. I know after a while as a teacher, you get concerned with STAR. And I was pre-K, I was concerned. Oh, do they know their letters? I'm not too worried about the mission. I'm worried about, do they know their letters and sounds and can they read? And so it's like, it's a hat trick, you know, like you gotta keep it going. But I could tell Mariana, just keep sending that message out, send that message out. I mean, we had
That's
a
a good point.
fantastic turnout this weekend, that past
Mhm.
weekend, we had a fantastic turnout. And I think things like that need to happen, but
You're absolutely right. And I think that's one thing that Ms. Gallegos and I have been discussing is how do we do that? And you have the quarterly, but making those very meaningful. And I think one of the things is when they create the plan, it's not one person creating, but it's a committee. And so part of that is on leadership teams is holding that, being accountable to each other. So when we meet, like a lot of people do this through their CPERC. And so when you meet with your CPERC, you update that and you do that. But that is probably a challenge that we have. And that's a very good point that we need to work through. Absolutely.
I would say some of the principals who do their PLCs would integrate into their PLC time too. I know they go over their data. I know they post their data and like it's all over the rooms, like, oh my God, that's the data room, you know, they know how the kids are doing. But anyway, that wasn't my concern.
Anybody else have any questions?
I
Yes,
have
Dr.
just
Castleberry, yes, of course.
One question.
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Casey. Is there somewhere in every plan an accountability piece that specifically indicates how much students are expected to grow?
I don't know that there's a specific growth index on there. I would say, I'm going to say, no, I can't say that there is. There's a percentage probably of how much we want them to grow, but not a growth number.
Well, the percentage would get at what I'm looking for, but some level of accountability. So we know, or a principal knows what the expectation is for that campus. And central office can determine whether or not that expectation was met.
Yes, absolutely. We do have that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Ms. Casey?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mancha.
I noticed that most of them are concerning with third, fourth, and fifth grade. Is there anybody working with the second grade so they can prepare for the following year? On a lot of the data, I didn't see anybody as far as second grade.
Yes, absolutely. So what this is just a big overview. Like I said, Adams, for example, it's a page long, but her CIP is 40 pages. And so it's just, what is the big idea? What is it that you want to communicate as your big goals? Well, everyone has accountability goals. But if you look at their CIP, you'll find that broken down by grade level and then the different assessments, because we have formative assessments at every grade level.
If I may, Madam Chair. You know, as my wife was a school teacher, she was a kinder teacher and a pre-K teacher. And for a lot of years, she would always say, they don't listen to us, especially the kinder teachers. And they say, we can tell them which kids are going to struggle, which kids are not going to struggle when they get to first grade, second grade, and then when they get to testing level. So that's why I was concerned with that, because, you know, for years and years, she would always come home and complain. You know, they're not listening to us when we can tell them which kids are going to struggle, which kids are not going to struggle. You know, so instead of dividing the kids in a certain way, you can divide them where you got the kids that need the most work with the teacher that's going to give them that extra effort. So, but thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, moving on to agenda item E.
So E is our district improvement plan. And so basically, we're also required to have a district improvement plan. Our plan is, I guess, a broader level. And on the first page, it starts on page 36. These are some of the requirements that we have to include in our district improvement plan. So we have a description of the community, student achievement data we include in there because we build from there. What are our needs? Where do we see our biggest holes? How do we move from there? We have perceptions from campus and community, process and programs for teachers and students. And then we have to address bullying, migrant, ESSA, IDEA, which is special ed, Rehabilitation Act, Perkins and CTE has to be addressed. Anything that's federally funded or funded through state compensatory services, we have to address in the plan because this is kind of what determines how you spend your money. So it's not that we're randomly spending money. There is a plan. It's part of a bigger plan to increase student achievement or to increase programming. And all of that you should find in our district improvement plan. We also include Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Head Start, homeless is a big part of the plan. And then, of course, servicing at-risk students. One big addition on your next few pages is we have it broken down by what is our accountability measure, and then our board goals. These are the goals that you have as board goals. And then we have academic goals. These are not with under every goal, we also have performance objectives, and that breaks it down to even more. So while it may say third grade, when you go in there, we can look at second grade, first grade, kinder, and that's when you find other measurement progress measures. It's not just that one goal. Then we also have staff recruitment and retention. That is a huge part of our funding and where we spend our money. Parent and community engagement, and that includes all of our counseling, all of our social emotional supports. One big addition to our district improvement plan this year is our ESSER funds. And so what we did with those funds, it's kind of highlighted in the next few pages. We did quite a bit with our staffing. That's how we supported our staff and students with MCLs and of course our RTI teachers. And then of course, the amounts that were given to us and then how much we budgeted where. That's included in the executive summary, and then that's also included in our district improvement plan. We work on this basically in pods, I would say, because we have our social emotional group working with administrators and campuses. We have our academic team, we have our program teams. And so we have several people working at different components of this, and then we all kind of come together and work through it.
I have a question, Ms. Casey.
Yes, ma'am.
The district improvement plan, will that be posted on our district website?
Yes, ma'am. I believe our 2021 is posted. When this goes to the board, when all of these go to the board and they're approved, we'll post the 21-22 plans.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, and that is required that we have them posted.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions or comments for Ms. Casey on our district improvement plan? Is she okay? Okay. Okay, then I think we're ready to move on to the next one. That would be agenda item F.
Okay, SHAC. So we have a committee. It's for our Student Health Committee. This actually you can find on our website as well when you go to departments. This is led by Dolly Armstrong. She is head of our PE program. And this actually had a lot of legislation go through this year regarding SHAC. And so I will tell you, she does a great job with this. She has meetings. You have to have a minimum of 4. There's quite a bit of policy regarding SHAC in our policies. And one of them is the committee that's made. So it actually asks that the board appoint a minimum of 5. But as practice, what Dolly has done is she has anybody that's recommended, they bring to board for approval. And so I had kind of followed up with her. We have one parent being recommended that actually for approval that will represent 2 campuses. So one of the requirements is that they do have a student at any one of our schools, and they can stay on the committee over 2 years or a minimum of 2 years. Anybody can be recommended. Somebody can self-recommend. Anybody can recommend it. All of these often came from coaches, or they came from campus principals, or they came from peers. We also have several of these parents that are very active in our other parent groups that are kind of recruited to do this. There are bylaws for SHAC. I know she mentioned that we had several board members that over the years have served on the SHAC committee as parents. When they were not board members, they're board members now that they served. So there's a lot of experience on our board with that. They talk about curriculum, anything with health, they talk about, but they also talk about our child nutrition, foods. They talk about counseling. It's basically all of the health and wellness that goes into all aspects of our schooling. And so this committee meets there is a flyer going out on this on NHH for you. We have a meeting on the 17th. That's actually going to be a meeting in person. And so that is just something you're all invited to. But basically she has an agenda. They have to meet. Part of legislation is now they have to record it and have it available. All of those things you can find on our website. So this agenda item is for you to approve the recommendation for Miss Maricela Reina, representing both Morrill and Gilbert, and she'll be an additional parent to the already existing committee members, which are listed.
Ms. Casey, I have a question. How long have we had this committee?
So, I called her because I was like, I never know. So this actually started in 2010.
Oh, okay.
So from 2010 to now, she's had the committee, but the committee has evolved.
Mhm.
And with this last legislative session, there's been quite a bit around this. And I think that's in response to all the social emotional needs and the health and wellness of kids that has come up.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for answering that question. Anybody else have a question or a comment for Ms. Casey?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mancha.
it's actually been around a little bit longer than 2010. I served on the very first committee when we had Mr. Jordan here. As a parent, I think my oldest daughter was in 3rd grade. But it's a real good program. Just one of my questions, how many meetings are we having per year?
I could get that. I know we have to have a minimum of 4. I think she has 6 scheduled. I believe we have sent that home in HH before, but we can resend it because she has them scheduled for the year.
Yeah, that was gonna be one of my concerns is that it used to be Miss Gina Castro was the one that used to run the shack, the one that actually Mr. Jordan had appointed to take over check. And we used to have at least a meeting a month to discuss. We discussed a lot of stuff that's happening now, which was one of the greatest things about having a special restroom for certain kids. I mean, that was discussed, before 1997, she brought that up. So it was something that we worked on and that we talked about sexual harassment, for the young, bringing in one of the other programs that we actually had a hard time because we stayed, I think Josie Scales was on it. We stayed until 1 o'clock in the morning because we had a father from St. Leo's Catholic Church, and then we had the gentleman from Trinity Lutheran Church, Reverend Cope. And of course, they didn't want anything thought about, protection, about anything like that, contraceptives and stuff. And then we had a group of parents that wanted it, so it was a long battle. But we worked it out to where it was up to the parent whether the child can go to the program or not. And it was so good that we were able to bring stuff, a lot of stuff that we worked on. But having 4 meetings a year, I mean, there's so limited time, and then I think we only meet for about an hour and a half, and that's it. We really weren't getting, the last few years, we didn't get nothing really accomplished like we did in the past. Can you imagine talking about some of the stuff that we have now in the 90s, where now it's in effect, but our social workers would go and they would be able to work on stuff like that. So I would love for it to come back to become something great again.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any questions or comments for Ms. Casey? Okay, moving on to agenda item G. Is that Ms. Casey again?
Yes, this is the last one. So last year, we had a board resolution. Actually, we brought it twice to the board. And in that resolution, what we did is we excluded the spring grades from 1920 for all of the kids in high school to count towards their GPA and their rank. Because two things happened in 1920. One, we had school closure, which affected, but the other thing is we actually changed how we graded in the spring. So we no longer graded for mastery, which is required by law. The state gave us leeway in how we graded. So we kind of graded on a lot of grace, and we also graded were students participating, were they engaged, were they logging in, but it wasn't necessarily on mastery. And so we didn't think it was fair to do that. What we've done now, we're in a new SIS, a new system, and it's called Ascender. We've done quite a bit of work on GPA and ranks. We have over 4,000 high school students, and we've probably gone through every student individually and made sure they were accurate. During this time, what we found is in 2017-18, we did not include middle school ranks per policy. 18-19 was the first year that middle school grades that counted or were calculated for GPA and rank. So we had students in 6th grade possibly that took a course that it counted for GPA and rank in 2018-19. What this resolution does is it excludes the whole year of 1920 for middle school kids. What we found during that year in looking at data for middle school students in particular, if they were in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, that was a trying year. And we don't want students to carry a 60 or a 50 or anyone that failed, which we did have a high failure rate, into high school, because then they're starting their year in high school with a low GPA and a low rank because of something that happened maybe 6th grade. This will affect students that were in 6th, 7th, and 8th in 18-19. So we'll have to cycle those kids out. For other kids, it's going to count. So we have these cohorts of students that have different kind of calculations per policy because of these exceptions, but we do feel it's what's best for students and best for students now and long-term. The second part to that is high school students knew very well they were working on courses and earning credit, and they were earning GPAs. We really cannot say that these students during COVID, that was communicated clearly to parents and students for them to understand that there are consequences for this that could be longer term and could really make the difference between a student being ranked in the highest 7th percentile to 10th percentile and being accepted or not to one of our state universities for automatic admissions.
Any questions? Oh,
I'm sorry.
yes.
And
go ahead.
Ms. Juarez has the paper, the actual resolution. If you want to, you have it. And so that's just it. It's just during that time for any student that earned middle school credit, they will not be counted towards their GPA and rank. And we're able to do that in our new system.
I do have a question. When you say middle school credit, we're not talking about, or we are maybe, middle school students taking a high school course?
Yes. So
Uh-huh.
for example, if they took algebra, that's a high school credit course. So their credit will count. Sorry, but the grade they earned that year will not count towards their GPA.
Thank
But
you.
their credit will count.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes. So they'll get credit for the course. They just won't carry that grade for the
Yes.
course. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any, Mr. Luna?
I wasn't sure what you said about the high school kids that were 1920.
So in 1920, high school students were in the spring, we did not grade them like we graded them in the fall. So what we did, and this was a board resolution, 1920 the spring semester did not count toward their GPA or rank. So we actually in the board resolution said, these are the grades that won't count. This is when we're going to calculate for valedictorian and salutatorian, and this is when we were going to do that. So we had to go back and basically detail all of those things based on the idea that we weren't grading the way we were prior COVID, post-COVID for just that spring. 2021, the state basically said you have to go back to grading the way we're supposed to. And that was something that the state had given us an allowance on.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Casey? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Casey. Moving on to agenda item H. Is that Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening on item H is the discussion of the investment quarterly report. Some highlights and it's noted on your board book on page 44. The main funds is general fund. There's a decrease because in August, during that quarter, we don't receive a payment from the state. It's their way of waiting for a settle up based on what we've earned. And based on that, then they send us a payment starting, they resume sending us payments in September. The next fund was the debt service. There was a significant decrease from that. And that's because we have our August bond payments that are due on August the 15th. The next fund saw an increase, which was the settlement fund. Basically, the settlement fund provided monies available to purchase iPads and Chromebooks in a sense that that money was provided so that way we could get reimbursed. And at that time during the quarter, we received reimbursement from the COVID coronavirus relief fund. So we put the money back into the settlement funds. And so those monies are being used for the facility assessment in the stadium regarding that. The facility assessment fund is a new investment. That's the result of our maintenance and tax notes that we sold. And so that fund accounts for those proceeds. And so with those proceeds, they are being used for the various items that were on our district assessment, priority 1 and priority 2, since those are existing, what they call footprints, and these monies can be used to improve those facilities. Basically, the last item regarding the investments is, again, our rates range from 0.02% to 1.191%. And so that is how we ended the quarter on the investments. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? I definitely need to look into this. I am not a math person at all. So I will be emailing questions if I have any.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Luna? No? Ms. Ortiz? No. Ms. Limon? Mr. Moreno? And Mr. Mancha? Okay. If any of us have questions, we certainly can email those.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Agenda item I. Mr. Hernandez, is
Yes,
that you
ma'am.
again? Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The next item is the quarterly budget report. I've given a briefing on that on page 49 of your board book. And basically, it's this first quarter of our new budget year. We've budgeted $135.2 million in revenues, and then we've got budgeted $144.4 million in expenditures. So we have a budget deficit as we started the year and now is at 9.2 million. One of the factors that is impacting the district is the calculation by the state for the hold harmless. As we know, when they calculated hold harmless, they used ADA from 1920 and then also factored that into their calculation. So basically, our ADA that they use for the funding for 2021 was 11,733, but the actual ADA for that year was 10,175. So based on their calculations, they use that in order to determine what the amount of state fundings that we would get, and the difference then would be coming out from our ESSER monies. So in the second paragraph of that briefing, it gives you the difference between those two of 11.2 million. So that's a difference of what the state would have funded us, and we wouldn't have had to go into our ESSER funding, but based on their guidance, then that is something that we have to do. Now, we're using this in order to monitor this year's budget and looking at and planning for 22-23. Because if our ADA does remain at 10,175, then that definitely is going to be less revenues than we have budgeted. And so we'll need to look at that. But one of the guidance that the TA has provided is that the expenses that we're having our general fund, we basically can move those that we have in state comp, counselor's position and other eligible costs over to ESSER, and that will allow the general fund to recover from that shortfall that we experience with their calculation. The third paragraph on the briefing is just to again reiterate that our ADA is our enrollment is lower than what we had in the prior year by 470 students. So we are going to monitor that. Now, one bit of bright news in this quarter that we saw happen, and we alerted the board to, or provided information to the board, is that we closed the sale of the 100 acres to the KB Homes. And so that in itself brought in $3.4 million into the general fund. So again, that will be something that will be looked at as we go through the year and as we perhaps end the year. One last item regarding the Child Nutrition Fund is we're expecting any day now approval from the Texas Department of Agriculture, allowing us to serve evening meals. Now, we're going to pilot this at 2 schools because TDA then reviews the process that we followed and the guidance that we have to adhere to, the compliance part of it. We hope to receive clearance for that. And in February, we would be looking at rolling this out at 10 other campuses. Now, the helpful part to that is, yes, it's say we can claim additional meals, which brings in more revenues for our Child Nutrition Fund. And to their credit, in 1920 and 2021, there were no layoffs in that department, even though our claims for our meals significantly dropped. But we were able to keep that operation going. And so we know that with adding more meal service, that'll bring in additional revenues for the Child Nutrition Fund. So that's basically our quarterly budget report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Luna?
Yeah, I was reading some of it earlier in the report. When we say we can replace some of those losses of code due to ADA with the ESSER 2 funds, were those ESSER 2 funds allocated somewhere else already, or were they available?
Actually, what we were looking at ESSER 2, and it was following the guidance that TA was providing, they were actually telling school district that you can move some of your cost over from the general fund to your ESSER 2 monies. So that way, the other initiatives, like Ms. Casey just mentioned, we have our MCL teachers, we have our RTI teachers that the board approved, and we're funding those out of ESSER 3. Our hope was that we could move some of the expenses over from the general fund over to ESSER 2 and thereby start building up a cushion so we could sustain that. However, now what TEA is saying, they're only funding us up to the 10,000. The difference between that and what we would have received in hold harmless that we thought we were going to get from the state is 11.2 million. That's where we're going to now have to use that money instead of building up that cushion, use that to help us make up that difference.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Moreno.
Yeah, so I know I touched briefly, or I spoke briefly with Mr. Soto in regards to the letter that you had sent us on Friday, and it is kind of disheartening that the state and with TA guidance that they are going to force us into this situation versus just kind of honoring what they said they would do and saying, well, you have ESSER money, right? So go ahead and utilize it the way, you know, we need to, or however you see fit, even though they had issues too in deciding how to give those the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. But in addition to that, you know, one, we can note that I know Mr. Soto has other plans as well from what he was sharing, and I'm sure he'll he'll elaborate in regards to getting more support, especially with the other legislation going by the federal government as well. But the idea with the meals, I know that's a great way to offset the costs. Can you be clear on how they'll be counted? Because I know a lot of times it's difficult with our kids to get them to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and having them take it, and then you have to document it correctly and all those aspects of it. It is a little bit difficult because our kids are just going to be like, I don't want it. And we have to literally have to put it in their hands and say, take it, because I need you to take it, because if not, we're going to lose money. Like it's really difficult to do that. So how does it really count? Do we just have to document it? They have to leave the door with it or just a piece of it. I know it's just a really minute question, I guess, but it's really kind of, it's difficult sometimes because I know at the campuses, you're going to be like, just take it, give it to somebody else. I mean, a lot of times it unfortunately gets thrown away. So, I mean, that's the reality of things. I don't know why kids don't want the food except the chips. So,
Yes, sir. And in fact, I think our district is unique in that we serve breakfast in the classroom. And that's pretty much almost 100% count of our meals. And so our teachers are very understanding of the way it has to be documented. We actually went through a desk audit review with TDA, the Texas Department of Agriculture. And there's certain ways that they actually have to mark that documentation that you talk about. But the teachers have been very cooperative, the principals as well. And so we're able to claim almost 100% of our breakfast meals. We're trying to provide more hot meals during the lunch period to make it more attractive to the students. We are running across some issues as every restaurant is in town as far as deliveries. And so sometimes you'll get a response from a parent saying, well, they just served that to my child 2 days ago. And that's because at the last minute, our vendor that was going to provide us a different meal wasn't able to make that delivery. So we're making adjustments. But again, our staff is very conscientious about making sure our documentation is well done. And so that way we can maximize our claims. So we're happy that we're back face to face because we do certainly see the increase in the meal claims go up this year.
yeah, because I think obviously I think I noted that last year too, our cafeteria staff is like working nonstop, especially last year when they were actually making weekend baskets for them. It was insane how hard our staff was working. And it was just frustrating to see it just all thrown or just left there by our kids for the weekends. I mean, I'm assuming it's still counted for us because it's there because it gets delivered into the classroom, but I know they have to just actually have it in their hand in order to count or something to that effect. Those are the tough ones, the meals, but I definitely, whatever we can do to support that. The other thing is just, that's a good point because I'm always in the lunchroom, right? And so these kids are like, man, we just had this. And I'm assuming it's because of deliveries, because it's like they're having pork every other day, and it's like, this sandwich, this, and the kids get like, I don't want that. And I really have to get them, just get up, please, just grab it. If you don't want it, I'll give it to somebody else type of thing. So I know that's the MO for sure right now with some of the food. I'm like, no wonder that makes perfect sense on why they're kind of serving the same things throughout the week, and the next week it's like the same thing you're gonna get a burger on Friday. So it is what it is.
Yes, sir. And one more thing on the budget, we recently got information from TEA regarding grants. So we certainly are looking at those grants. In fact, one recent grant was additional monies to assist us in buying masks, hygiene, sanitizers, ventilators. So we're looking at those funding sources as TEA puts them out. Ms. Gallegos has been excellent in working with departments to gather the information from them so that way we can apply for those grants. So any place that we can tap into new resources, then we certainly are doing that.
Mr. Hernandez, I have a question,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I don't know if you have the answer to it. How are those evening meals going to be distributed?
They will be distributed there at the campus. The main point for those is that if there's a program that's offered voluntary to all students, so it's like tutoring. So if tutoring is offered at the high schools or at a middle school, then any child can go by and pick up an evening meal. So you'll have the football team, the cheer team, the spirit team, band, because at that school, they're offered free tutoring, or they're offered tutoring, and it's available to everybody. So as long as you have that caveat in there, then you can have other children be served the meal there. And so what that does for us is that helps us put in a claim, and there certainly is a high rate of reimbursement for that. The difficulty that we see is getting staff, because remember, these ladies come in at 6 a.m. and now we're going to have them stay till almost 5:30 in the evening. So we're certainly looking at other districts. How are they making it attractive so that they do work and they work hard, that they'll work throughout the day.
And so those students that are in an after-school care program in the elementary schools, they would still also be able to get those evening meals?
Yes, ma'am, I
uh-huh.
believe they would. I
Okay.
would believe they would.
Madam Chair, one more thing.
Yes, Mr. Moreno.
Because we deliver them to the classrooms, like breakfast. You're not going to deliver them to the classrooms?
No, because this is in the evening.
Yeah, we
after
deliver the
school.
lunches, I mean, the hot meals for dinner to the actual, like our lunch ladies are rolling on with wagons, taking meals to the kids.
Okay, well, this is the first year we're gonna
That's, I mean,
develop our
this is the
plan.
second
and-
year we've been doing it,
Yeah.
but I mean, I was under the assumption you'd probably do the same, and you take it to them, there's no reason, no excuse they can't pick it up and go with it. Right? Or
Madam
Well,
Chair.
well, certainly.
or is this a different program?
No, it's very similar, Ms. Moreno. I did study a little bit of Southside on how they were doing it, and the pushback is the academic portion of it, that there's some time built in the last 15 minutes of each of the end of the day, and it's to eat. And the pushback is from the teachers and the kids staying for those 15 minutes because they don't want the meal, as you're saying. Those kids don't want the meal. What I was trying to target here at Harndale was more of the kid that's here till 8 o'clock at night. And they'll eat that, like, for example, middle school baseball. We started this program and they had to play at the stadium the other day, and they had a double header. Well, the first two teams were able to get home a little earlier, but the second two teams didn't leave the campus till about 6:30, 7 o'clock to get to the stadium to finish up the game. Though that's kind of like the target that I'm trying to get to those kids that aren't getting home to eat, where they don't have vehicles to leave. And you're talking about freshmen, you're talking about the band kids that are there for 3 or 4 hours after school. So we're going to tackle it a little different, where we don't tie it into the end of the day academically, and kind of do it more of an after school. But as Mr. Hernandez is saying, is we have to be creative to be able to afford it to anyone. So there's got to be some kind of program. It can't be we can't just feed the football team, or we can't just feed the athletes. It's got to be to the entire campus. Ms. Gallegos, it's got to be available to any kid on the campus that would come pick up the food. So hopefully that is more enticing for the kid that really does want that meal, that they'll come get that meal and take it with them.
Yeah, and I mean, we had the experience too, because I'm sure you probably were aware of the Be a Champion meals. And I mean, I think what we're doing now, even though it's a 10-minute stay and we have to stay longer, that's what the superintendent wanted. From what Mr. Osborne tells us over there, it's like, it's working to get those funds. I mean, and we're not missing out on numbers. But, you know, in addition to that, I don't think the bill to Be the Champion was as successful as the approach that they took here. But obviously you guys can assess it and evaluate it, and it's being piloted. So next year you can see how it works in terms of who utilizes it. Because to me, I'm really more on the elementary and middle school kids, because I know our high school kids, they can find a way to get things that they need more so than a 6 or 7-year-old kid, or, you know, a 12-year-old kid. So, I mean, you know, they're more resourceful, but, you know, a lot of times too, the coaches buy a lot of things out of pocket for them. And they do that on their own accord. So sometimes they'll still probably not take the meals because they're like, oh, I already got pizza from coach. So.
You know, I'm gonna mention something on a personal note. My daughter stays with the football team at the high school. She's a student athletic trainer. And there are times where, you know, I drop her off at 7 a.m. when the football team is practicing, because she has to be there. Then she has a full day of school. And then she'll either stay for mariachi or she stays for the athletic program. And I'm not picking her up until maybe 7:30 at night. And she's home so tired that she literally just goes home, does homework, and goes to sleep. And so I ask her, what did you eat today? And she's like, well, at 11:30, I had an apple, or I had a banana, or I had lunch. And so I know that on a personal note, my daughter would take advantage, and a big group of those students that by the time they get home, they're tired. They've got homework, they've got to study for the test, and they think they don't have time to eat a dinner. And so I am very grateful for Harlandale to look into doing for our kids so that they can stay focused on their schoolwork and on their activities and then their tutoring, because then I'll know she has a choice. You know, I know that I don't have to worry about, she's just gonna go straight to bed and not eat dinner. So I'm very grateful for the district to doing that for my child and everybody else's child who may be in the similar situation. So thank you very much for looking into that and bringing it to the district. Anybody else, any questions or comments? No. Okay, so the next agenda item is J. Is that you, Mr. Hernandez, as well?
Yes, ma'am. Like Ms. Casey. I've got J, and it's regarding the budget amendments for this month. And on page 54 of your board book is a transmittal. Basically, the first two entries or budget amendments that are being recommended are coming out of the fund balance. And one is to comply with the Stop to Bleed program. It's a state mandate, basically to develop protocols for employees to follow in the event of a traumatic injury. And so we finally gotten that together and have met. And so the estimated cost for that is $26,575. The second item that comes from the fund balance is a recommendation for $10,500. And this is to provide extra duty pay for some additional teachers to service some students as we see an increase of these students that are homebound and are through the Section 504. And so with that, we want to make sure we service those students. So we're asking for an increase for the extra duty of $10,500, which brings a total reduction to the fund balance of $37,075. The next budget item is within the budget itself. So it's not an increase or decrease to the budget. Basically, it's to move funds to provide for staff development from a function 11 to a function 13. These were monies that were approved last month due to a state grant that would service special ed students. The last item for budget amendments is what we call our donation fund. Basically, we're budgeting monies that were donated to either a campus or a department. And in this case, we received $3,000 from the Texas Cavaliers for Columbia Heights. It was the art contest winner. And then from the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, $2,500 for staff to provide staff development to our fine arts department.
I have a question, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Hernandez. On that Stop the Bleed program, is it all school employees or is it just a number of employees
Let me
that
ask,
get that training?
yes, either Ms. Rena or Mr. Corporal Olivares.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank
Thank
you. Uh-huh. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hernandez? I am sorry. Mr. Mancha? No? Oh, okay. Mr. Luna? Okay, I think we don't have any questions on that particular agenda item. Moving on to agenda item K. Is that you, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, ma'am. It's time to cast our votes. We're presenting to the board a resolution on how to cast the 39 allotted votes from the Bureau Appraisal District for those that are on the ballot. Your ballot is on page 59 of your board book, and it lists the individuals that are candidates for being voted into being as a director on the Bureau Appraisal District. Last meeting or the recent meeting was the board's recommendation to nominate Mr. Luna as one of the nominees. So again, what we are doing or what we would be asking the board to approve is a resolution on how the district wants to cast its 39 votes. So and on page probably 60 of your board book, it gives you the breakdown of all the taxing entities and all the number of votes that everyone's allotted.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
When was the last time we had somebody from the Harlandale School Board on?
That was with Thomas Uresti, and I'm not sure, I think maybe about 10 years ago, I believe. And he was able to work with the other taxing entities to where they casted their votes for him and he was elected.
I say, this is my suggestion. We give Mr. Louis 38 of the votes and I'm a nominee, I'd get 1 vote. He's retired, he's got more time. And he would do an excellent job. Yes, he will. No. It's
No,
just,
and so-
yeah. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah. I can't, but I leave 1 at least. I don't want to look that bad. Any questions for Mr. Hernandez or comments or on this particular item?
Just a point of information. That means these entities get that many votes from their board?
Yes, sir. They can cast the number of votes that they have allotted to them in any manner, just as Ms. Cavazos was suggesting. You can split them up between the different candidates that are on the ballot. The only, what I would need to make sure is that on the evening, next Monday night, is that that we do specify how the board wants to cast its votes.
Thank you.
Any
So if
questions?
you really want, you really have to actively lobby yourself, sir.
Mhm,
It's a uphill battle.
mhm. I have faith in you, Mr. Luna. I have faith in you. Okay, no more questions on that particular agenda item. Moving on to agenda item L. Is that you, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am. Agenda L is something that we have planned and strategized for after each audit year or fiscal year that we finish. Just as we ended the budget process for the 21-22 school year, one of the items was to approve a retention stipend for staff of $600 that was going to be given in December and May. And in that discussion, one of the things that was alluded to was that to see how we would end up in the end of our fiscal year 2021, and that information will be disclosed on the next budget item, on the next agenda item. But one of the good things that we're able to do with the ESSER money was to have eligible all the instructional staff and campus-related staff be paid from ESSER monies. So that certainly took out a big amount of what is normally budgeted out of the general fund when we do this retention stipend. So when you look at that, if we, as staff, then we looked at that and we are looking at recommending adding another $400 to the stipend to bring it up to 1,000. And so within the ESSER funds, we do have that allocated. The cost to the general fund would then be those that are non-campus related staff. And so the added cost to the general fund would be $311,600. And that would actually be split between the general fund and the child nutrition fund as well, which has a fund balance at the end of a 2021 school year. So with that, the other recommendation is to then, if it is approved, to increase it to 1,000, is to keep it at providing that stipend in December and in May at 500, which would then be $500 on each payment. And the reason for that is because one of the other things that resulted when the state made a recalculation on our state funding based on the amount that the lowering of the funding, they also adjusted the amount of monies that we get monthly. So I think for cash management wise, that's one of our recommendations also, is to remain at the December to May distribution. It's also staying in line with the purpose of retention stipend. And there's eligible caveats within the within the allotment and who's eligible. Basically, it's employees as of November 7th for 2021 would be eligible for the December installment. And then those employees employed as of April 10th, 2022 would be eligible for the May installment. So any employees that began after those dates would not be eligible. And also any full-time employees that submit a letter of resignation or retirement in lieu of termination or disciplinary action would not be eligible. And again, trying to stay in line with the purpose of what we call the retention stipend. So that's something that we would be recommending to the board for Monday.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Luna.
Just on the bi-weekly employees, when in December will they get the stipend?
They would get that, I believe, the second week of December.
Okay.
Yes, I think. And the reason we do that is because then we have another bi-weekly pay week, because they're not here during the Christmas holidays. We have another bi-weekly pay week after that. And then this way it allows us that if there's anybody that got missed, that we make sure that they get it on the second bi-weekly pay period.
And the ones that don't qualify, if they retire by what time, what day?
So if they're employed as of, for November, for December's payment, if they're employed as of November 7th and they had not submitted a letter of resignation or retirement in lieu of termination or disciplinary action, then they would be eligible. But if after that date or prior to that date, they submitted a resignation under those terms, then they would not be eligible.
All right, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Moreno.
if I may, just
Yes, of course.
just like what we referred to back in August. Thank you, Mr. Soto and team, for honoring the suggestions and the request that perhaps some of our colleagues out in education were suggesting. Appreciate you guys doing your due diligence to find ways to provide an additional token of appreciation. I think that's very admirable of you guys to do. And I know in comparison to others, being able to get a GPI and also a retention stipend is significant. So thank you, guys.
Anybody else? Any comments or questions? Okay, moving on to agenda item M. Is that you, Mr.?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
As we do every year, and every school district goes through an independent audit of its finances. We are at this point now where we're presenting it to the board for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. Each year, our independent auditors go through our finances for review of our internal controls, our compliance, and also just to report on the financial conditions of the school district. In your board book on page 67 is a recap of what I have as a result of the finances for the end of the fiscal year. And it gives you different points to look at and to consider. But most importantly this evening is that we have your independent auditors that report to the board the results of their audit. And so this evening we have from Garza Gonzalez and Associates, the partner Renee Gonzalez, and the audit manager, Ruben Martinez. So at this point, I would like them to please come up and present the report. Ms. Juarez is passing out their executive summary as well as the management letter. And one of the things that I do want to say is that we are undergoing a conversion of our financial management system as well as our student system. So as with any conversion, there's been some setbacks that we've had to deal with. So we've been on a tight timeline, and they've been cooperative and understanding to us in us getting them their information. So that's why this evening, this is part of the result of that is they've worked with us to make sure that we got all our information in. They're able to do their audit. And so now they're here this evening to make their presentation. Mr. Gonzalez.
Trustees, I'm your senior managing partner with Garza Gonzalez and Associates, your independent auditing firm. And with me is Ruben Martinez, who was the audit manager on this particular engagement. As Richard has indicated, what we issue for you is the larger report, which is called the annual financial report that I would think you have in your packet. Maybe as a draft, but it's still pretty much a final report. And then we issue a second report, which is called the Conduct of Audit Report, which is like a 5 or 7 page report. And those are 2 reports that we issue to you. You've hired us to come in and perform, as Richard has indicated to you, looking at the financial statements. Since you do a lot of monitor programs, operate federal and state programs, we're also required to issue different opinions on your compliance with those particular programs. I'm happy to report to you that as your auditors, we come in and review internal controls. We don't look at 100% of the operations. We do a sample review, and we have issued an unmodified opinion, also known as a clean opinion or as an unqualified opinion, meaning that's the best opinion that you could have gotten from a CPA firm as it relates to your financial statements, the disclosures in those reports, and the numbers that are reflected in those reports. Because you do administer federal and state funds, as I indicated before, we also issue 2 other reports, one on internal controls. And I'm happy to report in that report, we would tell you whether there were any material weaknesses, any deficiencies in your operation, and or any non-compliance issues. And I'm happy to report that none of those are being reported. We found that management did comply with the material findings, and any question costs would be the other thing that we would be raising to you if there was an issue. We would, if expenses were incurred, excuse me, that were not within the grants, we would then question those costs, and then it would be up to the feds or the state to determine whether they should be allocated to you or not. But in this case, no material weaknesses, no deficiencies, no findings, major findings, and no question cost. In addition to that, on the summary on page 1, on number 3, we share with you what were the major programs that we tested this particular year. And then on item number 4, we give you a breakdown of the general fund as it was at the end of June 30th, 2021. I know you keep looking at that general fund because it keeps moving through the present period. But at June 2021, the picture of that was you had a $62.68 million in the fund balance. And the table below that gives you the breakdown of where those general fund monies are segregated. Non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and the unassigned, you got about $35 million in there. That represents 86 days of operation, meaning that if you had to close down and no additional funds were to come in, you would be able to operate the district in its full capacity for the remainder of 86 days, which is almost 3 months, a very good fund balance level. On page 2 of our summary, we also share with you on number 5, the budget to actual numbers. And I think in Mr. Hernandez's item that he provided for you, he also describes that basically you thought you were going to be dipping into your fund balance, and it came out actually as an increase of about $3.4 million, increase your fund balance by $9.4 million. There was a subsequent event that we disclosed in the financial statements, something that occurred after June 30th, but that we thought was material to disclose in the financial statement. That's, of course, the sale of the 104 acres of property that went to KB Homes, and the amount, of course, that would generate for the school board to be utilized as you see fit. I don't know if there's any particular questions on the report. I know it's a pretty thick report. There's a lot of information in there that you as readers and your taxpayers and the public can review that and raise some questions. But we feel very comfortable. Your staff provided all the information that we needed. As I shared with you, we went on a sample basis. We don't look at 100% of your transactions. They were extremely cooperative, provided us what we asked for. We decide what we're going to look at. We decide what sample size we're going to pick and manage, and then provide the information to us. They were cooperative in that fashion, and we were able to do this on a timely manner. As Mr. Hernandez mentioned, it was a very difficult year for all of us, everybody, not only in our industry, but in the school districts. We do a number of school districts. We all had, it was challenging during this particular period of time. But we were able to come here before you and get this report out, and it's due by the end of November. So we're on a timely basis here. Ruben, you want to share anything else?
I think thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. He hit all the highlights are for you. Just want to clarify really quickly, although you had an increase into the general fund balance of approximately 9.4 million. The school district, as Mr. Hernandez had reported to you, had a loss in operations of 12.9 million, but it had the effect of increasing the fund balance with the maintenance tax notes of $21.9 million. And so I just wanted to add that point clarification. In terms of the report on conduct, which is a smaller report, we are pleased to report to you that we also did not have any difficulties in dealing with management while conducting the audit. If there were any difficulties, we would be reporting them to you. So we're pleased to report that we had, again, 100% cooperation, and we'd like to thank the finance staff and the programmatic staff as well, because we do audit those federal programs for their assistance that they provided during the 2 phases of the audit that we did here. We did 2 parts. We did one on-site visit, the first phase, and then the second phase was mostly remote, but it worked as efficient as possible. I know you understand that the district is going through a conversion of the accounting system, and so there was a few delays in there. But again, as Mr. Gonzalez said, we're pleased that we're here timely reporting this to you, and it'll be on the agenda for Monday's approval as well. Any questions? We'll be happy to answer.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Limon.
how long was this process, the timeline on this? You started from what, and how long were you, you said you were virtual or? did you-
We were for the interim part, which is during, before the fiscal year end, we do come in and do some testing for your programs. And we probably spend virtually about 3 weeks. About 3 weeks, we got like maybe 2, sometimes 3 people working on this particular engagement. And then we come at year end, and at year end, then we were physically here, and we were here for another 2 weeks.
Yeah, about 2 weeks, and working here with the district, and then we work from our office remotely as well while the district is working on the preparation of the financial statements. We're still working hand in hand with Mr. Hernandez during that time period. So overall, it's a process of over a month if you look at it in terms of the 2 phases, remotely and or physically present here.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else have any?
Yes.
Dr. Castleberry? Yes, ma'am.
In regard to your comment on page 2,
Yes, ma'am.
number 2, under report on the conduct of the audit,
Yes, ma'am.
you say that the concerns related to the Public Investment Act were satisfactorily addressed. That has to do with pledging securities to secure funds.
It had to do,
It was the quarterly investment reporting that in the prior year to that, we missed 1 quarter. And so part of their responsibility is to report that and make us aware of that. So the corrective action that we had was that we would just put it on our calendar and made sure that we always put it to make sure that that quarterly report was done. And so that's why actually you're seeing that today. So that way we make sure to stay compliant with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues? I guess not. Thank
very
you
good.
very much.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, we appreciate being here and presenting to you. And of course, as you know, we do report directly to the board. So if there's any questions that you see after today, I know we went through it pretty quickly, but it's a pretty thick document. Provides you, like I said, with a lot of information. At any point in time, you feel that you need any questions that we may be able to answer, we'd be happy to respond to those independently from here.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, gentlemen. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Okay, so moving on to agenda item N. Dr. Salinas?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President. I would like to address the board. We went through the long process of becoming a district of innovation. And One of the final things that we have to do is actually look at our policies. So our plan that was approved by the board was sent to our TASB policy consultant. She reviewed it, and these are the additions and or revisions to policies that we're going to be proposing for a vote, obviously, next week. The first one, we currently only have an AF legal policy. We do not have an AF local policy. On page 71 of your board book, you'll notice that that's an additional policy that they're recommending that we add. And all we have to do is that one brief statement there that includes the link to the innovation plan, so that anybody who looks up our policy, since they're public, can read our innovation plan. So that's the first addition. It's a brand new policy that we're proposing to the board. The second policy is a change to DBA local. And that has to deal with the credentials and records of our teachers. And you'll notice that there's a new area there called state teacher certification. This is in accordance with our district of innovation plan. We would like to propose for a policy that the state certification is not going to be required for the following teachers: CTE courses, CTE teachers. I'm missing a parentheses, in the following areas: health science, transportation, distribution and logistics, law and public service, architecture and construction, information technology, science, technology, engineering, and math STEM. Those are the designated courses that we brought forth earlier for an additional stipend as well. The other area that we would not require certification would be American Sign Language, and then dual credit mathematics. All other teaching assignments will require certification in accordance with the state law. Our plan does require these teachers to still have professional development, to still have their state licenses that they're required for certain areas. So they still have credentials that they need. We're just not going to require them to have a teaching certificate for DBA. The next one is DK local. Again, it's the exact same verbiage I just read, but they put it under the campus assignment that allows for the superintendent to have the authority to approve a request by a principal. So if a principal requests someone and they don't have the credentials, but they do have the state certifications and they meet these criteria, they would then be allowed to be hired in our district. And the last one is EB local, where we're going to, the only addition there is for the school start and end time. So we don't have to follow the requirement from the state. The state requires school districts to start no earlier than the fourth Monday in August and prohibits scheduling the last day of school before May 15th. But because we are a district of innovation, the district can begin instruction for students no earlier than the second Monday in August and shall end instruction for students no later than the second Friday in June. So those are the additions, one additional policy and then 3 revisions that's being proposed. I can answer any questions that you might have.
Just the final thing, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Is
Mendoza,
this
go
the
ahead.
last piece of it and then we're finally, everything's finalized?
After this, we can hopefully start hiring. Yes.
Okay,
Hiring with these new provisions.
all right, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Luna.
Just a board point information for me, I guess, because I really don't like when I see these acronyms because I don't know where to go. So you made this presentation, right? This memo, you created a memo, right,
Yes.
Doctor?
Yes.
So maybe for a while, or I can get a table of contents of what they represent, the AK, DBA.
Oh, yes, sir. Those are not acronyms. Those are policies that are placed in certain groups.
I'm more familiar with the numbers, so.
Per
that's-
TASB.
Okay,
So like, yeah, those don't mean anything. It just happened to be in the D series. The D series all are about personnel. The B
Okay.
series are all about local government. So those are just letters that they don't stand for anything. They literally are just letters in sequence of how TASB named the policy.
okay, because even I have trouble reading them, finding them sometimes. So I Google the policy and I just like, do I connect here? Do I connect this one? Am I playing golf? Am I playing
Right.
putt-putt? I don't know. It's
Yeah,
just,
that's just how they're named per
and then it's
TASB.
referenced in
We don't-
another, it's referenced in another paragraph. It's like, where'd I go? It's like,
Right. We don't name those. Those are from
I know,
TASB.
but-
Sorry.
I need training on that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Salinas?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Limon.
So I'm just trying to figure out on the list of departments, oh, I'm sorry, the list of departments you have, I'm sorry, of health science, I'm really concerned about due credit mathematics. Is that gonna be, you don't have to be certified to have, or you have to be certified?
So they would have their math certification, they could have
Math.
their teaching certificate, but to teach dual credit, you also need to have a master's in mathematics. Not everybody has a master's in mathematics. They might have a master's in school leadership, right? They might have a master's in another area. We could hire them. They just don't have the required masters for dual credit.
Okay. And American Sign Language, I mean, I know
Oh,
that we had hired a student that was graduated a couple of years ago, and she was one of our American Sign Language, so now it's not required to have the certification for that course too?
It won't be after this. We can
Yeah,
hire
I'm
someone
like-
who still has training in American Sign Language, yes. But it doesn't mean that they have a teaching certificate in American Sign Language. Yeah, go ahead.
So in the District of Innovation Plan, we kind of reviewed, they still have to have a degree in American Sign Language. But what happens with certification is it's two parts. And so what happens with our teachers is they may pass one part, but the part where they're actually having to certify, it really depends on who's scoring them. So they actually still have the credentials to teach. We're just not requiring that last certification component. But they do have experience. With the dual credit math teacher, you may have somebody who's teaching college level math, but has never taught K-12, so doesn't have a certification. What we need is someone that can teach our students college level classes. And so they, in effect, would be able to teach them that course.
Okay.
And that's why that provision is there, because they're not a traditionally certified teacher.
Great, thank you for clarifying. I was like, but okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions? No? Ms. Ortiz?
I have one. So we're going to be revisiting this each and every year when we expand our CTE programs.
If we do look to expand, we would have to revisit it, but this plan gets revisited every 5 years if we do not expand our CTE programs.
So I'm on the record of expanding our CTE programs.
So
Yeah, that's a
when-
good point because we are going to run into those issues again with hiring some of these other, if we do expand to some of those CTE certification areas, they're going to be high need hires. So again, we can look into, go ahead, Ms. Casey.
So basically, the areas we're looking to expand in, what these are like kind of umbrella. So when you talk about construction and architecture and construction, that includes your plumbing, your HVAC and all of those. So we have, these are like large umbrellas that pathways fall under. So our DOI plan is 5 years and that should happen. So we should be able to still employ and not have to come back based on what we want to do at this point.
Yes, ma'am. So they should all fall in line with some of these umbrellas.
So I want to go on the record also. We will be revisiting this every year because we won't have to. Okay, good. But yes, we do want to expand. I don't want to look into the possibility of expanding. I want to look into expanding. Yes, okay. I want that somewhere recorded, please. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Casey. Okay, so going on now to agenda item O.
Dr. Hinojosa.
Dr. Hinojosa.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. In your board book on page 76, it really refers to some a request during the construction in the Gillette Elementary School foundation project. During the construction, the contractors found that there are two main electrical supply conduits that supply the entire campus with electricity. I guess during the course of the time that the building settled and then some mud overlaid came in, it actually covered up one of the conduits. When the contractors got to the conduits and they inspected it, they noticed that there was it had been compromised. It had some cracks. and there had been some moisture and some mud that had actually gotten into the electrical, the fibers that were in the conduit. So they immediately stopped work, got with the architects to kind of see what the best remedy would be for it. And really, because of the compromised state and the fact that it already had some moisture that had gotten into it, their remedy was that entire section needed to be replaced. And so our Ms. Martinez and our director of maintenance, Mr. Ramirez, got with the engineering company to, in fact, put the proposal together. And again, as their remedies spoke, it needed to be replaced. At that point, because of the scope of the work that needed to be done, we did ask for some bids, some quotes, and we did receive. We solicited 4 companies. One did a no bid, and then the other 3 companies did provide us a quote that with the dollar amount of $80,909. Now on the positive side, the construction is ahead of schedule. So originally the maintenance tax note for that project was 3.2 million. It is ahead of schedule by several months, and so the projected end time should be either in December or in early January. But because of the fact that they are ahead of schedule, there is some savings that we have acquired from that original dollar amount. So this request would not add to any. It's not asking for any extra funding. It would actually come from the balance that we still have in our maintenance tax notes to be able to correct the issue.
Dr. Hinojosa, when you say they're ahead of schedule because they're doing a good job.
They're doing a
They're
good
not
job. No,
rushing through
no,
the
they're not
job.
rushing through it. They've actually been credited with the weather. They've had really, really good weather. And then they've been able to, that's just expedited their work.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments for Dr. Hinojosa? Nope. Ms. Ortiz, you're thinking. You want to say? Okay, I guess no questions, but if we do, we will email you. I
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
make sure that the board knows that just because we're having a work session, it does not mean we can no longer email questions or concerns or comments with regards to agenda items. That is still an option, and that is still there for us to use as much as we need to. So I wanted to make sure that every board member knows that. Mr. Soto, were you going to say something? Okay, so moving on to agenda item P, Ms. Veraza.
Yes, good evening. We're going to see a graph there on your screen. So as you can see, our enrollment for this month is 12,074 students. That's 96.46% compared to last year. And as you can see, we've also seen an increase every month in our student enrollment. So some of the procedures that our social workers are following to assist with leavers and no-shows are the following. Social workers are working with the campus administration team to pull a list of students who have not returned, as well as those who left during the last school year and are not enrolled. This is done weekly. Data is being pulled to look at all previous phone numbers, emergency contacts, and possible addresses. This includes looking at current data as well as information in the student's PRC file. Phone calls, letters, home visits, social media searches, and contacts with others who may know of a student's whereabouts are being done on a regular basis to attempt to locate students and families. As students attempt to enroll, the social workers assist as needed to remove barriers, obstacles impeding a smooth enrollment process for families, assisting with document retrieval, guidance through the enrollment online process, securing needed school supplies. Campus teams meet regularly to check status, progress, and potential leads, and this process continues on an ongoing basis to ensure all attempts are made to encourage students' return to HISD. Measurements include increased enrollment numbers, a decrease in leavers and coded dropouts, and monitoring of attendance rates. And social workers are also assisting in monitoring campus attendance on a regular basis and provide interventions removing any barriers for success. The campus team is ensuring that each school is a welcoming, consumer-friendly, and supportive environment as well.
Thank you, Ms. Veraza. Any questions or comments for Ms. Veraza?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Ortiz.
I would just ask that everything that you read, if that could be made a part of this and go on the public record in, when we go to our meetings. I would just, everything that you read be part of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Luna.
I know we got the data that where the kids were coming, the students were coming from last time. But do we have any more reasons as to where they were or why they weren't coming? Or where they at before? I mean, I'm thinking if there were some that were just not enrolled or maybe online or, and then the situation of COVID is getting a little bit better, so the parents started sending them to school.
Right, so the document that you received last month includes where students are coming from, whether it be other charter schools, other districts, some students that weren't enrolled, maybe were doing like homeschooling. And so that is a document that was created by our PEMS clerks. And so they can update it on a regular basis. So I don't know the exact place where the difference of students came from this month, but that's something that we can definitely look into.
Yeah, I think it looks pretty significant, our increase. I mean, I'm very glad to see that it's gone up. Really, I mean, for ADA sake. So thank you so much for your work.
Anybody else? No. Okay, well, before we go to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 4 to adjourn the meeting, I wanted to thank our staff and our district. Saturday, we had our 58th annual Frontier Bowl, and we could not have had a more beautiful day out there for tailgating and enjoying an evening of football. And it was a lot of work, I have to assume, because there was a lot going on that day, different things. But it was a sight to see. The number of families, the number of students, the number of visitors that don't have, students in our district, that don't live in our district, yet they bought tickets to come and enjoy the evening and enjoy the day with us. And I just wanted to say, for everything you all did, thank you very much, because I certainly enjoyed the day. And I enjoyed every minute of every single event we had. I know there was a lot going on that one day, and I just want to thank everybody who had a little part of making an evening such amazing evening. Those seniors were extremely happy. They might have not been happy, some of them because of the football score, but you know what? It was so good to see the community come together and be happy and enjoying each other's company. And I'm very, very appreciative of the work that it took to organize and put on an event like that. So I know it doesn't get any easier every year, but it certainly was so good to be back home and enjoy it. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to our district and our staff and everybody that put a little seed of that.
Madam President.
Yes.
I'd like to piggyback on that. I think we all appreciate, if you were there at Frontier Bowl and you were there for the tailgate, it was amazing. There was no place to park. There was, we had the banquet, we had the recognition of the veterans. I'd like to personally say, Mr. Soto, your staff did an excellent job. I am so happy that that you allowed Mariana to put that commercial on. It was wonderful because I had coworkers telling me, Harlandale Independent, oh, y'all have the Frontier Bowl. We saw you. They came up to me and said, I saw a commercial this morning about the Frontier Bowl. And these are people, I'm the only one that lives on the south side. Everybody else is from the north side, but they know that I'm on the Harlandale Independent School District Board of Trustees, and they shared that with me. And it takes things like that, little things, make a difference and bring out the pride. And thank you, Mr. Soto, for leading the way, having your staff do see that same vision and are behind you 100%. And I can't thank you enough. And I know my colleagues, we all enjoyed it. We were all there and all had something good to say. And so thank you very much.
So agenda item 4, is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Luna?
make the motion to adjourn.
Is,
I'll second that.
thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and take the vote. Mr. Luna, yay or nay?
Yay.
Thank you. Mr. Mancha, yay or nay?
Yay.
Mr. Moreno, yay or nay?
Yay, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Limon, yay or nay?
Yay.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Ortiz
Yay.
and myself, yay. It is, give me 1 second. Let me get my phone. I put it away. Let me see. It is 8:20 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good rest of the evening. Oh, shoot. What happened? I didn't either. I didn't eat.